Over the weekend, apparently all over the country, the tea towel wearers were out doing the From the River to the Sea march. Neil Finn, partly funded by you, the New Zealand taxpayer, got into it, of course. And it would seem that the stupidity is intensifying around New Zealanders who willfully ignore the death of our own children at the hands of their parents and don't protest about that. And the misinformation, to be honest, in Gaza continues. Apparently journalists are dying in huge numbers. They don't point out that some of those journalists took hostages and participated in the terror attacks on October the 7th and have held hostages since. Nor have they mentioned that some international doctors have turned away international aid workers who've been beaten by Hamas and left large numbers of them to die. But let's put that all aside at the moment. Meantime, our country considers whether or not to recognise a Palestinian state. And as Matthew Hooton wrote over the weekend, and occasionally makes sense, the fact is that with the Prime Minister having said, stupidly said, Chris from Accounts has said Netanyahu's lost the plot. And how could the government now not recognise the state of Palestine without making Chris Luxon look like a complete idiot? I guess for an assessment of where this debate is at, we're joined by Dr. Sheree Trotter, who's from the Indigenous Embassy for Jerusalem, set up by a group, I think, of Israeli and international people as a place to provide some connection or forum amongst Indigenous people with the State of Israel. And Dr. Sheree Trotter, who's been on the program before, joins us now. By video link, and my video's not working. That was a slight technical problem we had. Sheree, lovely not to see you again. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Sean. How are you?
Good, thank you. Look, a real flurry, firstly, of protest activity. And I've outlined this morning how New Zealand On Air, or taxpayers' money, has gone to fund some music events sponsored by New Zealand Music through New Zealand On Air that are clearly partisan on the issue of Palestine, involving artist and Chloe Swabrick being given public money to advocate clearly for a position which would support the recognition of the Palestinian state. Where does the Indigenous Embassy for Jerusalem stand on this?
Well, on the Palestinian state, we think it's premature to be recognising such a thing at this time. There's criteria laid out for what a state should look like. In fact, there's a convention, the Montevideo Convention, that people might want to look out. But you've got to have permanent population, a defined territory, a functioning government, and capacity for international relations. And at this stage, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, Hamas, which rules Gaza, these things are not evident there at all.
They are organised, though. Their flag is all over the world.
The Palestinian movement is very well organised and appears to be very well funded. I think this was one of the astonishing things we saw on the 8th of October, this coordinated campaign right across the globe, which has just continued to grow. So the movement is certainly doing well and well funded. But in terms of the Palestinian Authority governing the West Bank, and of course who would govern Gaza, and how would that work? Would they be separate governments? Would it be a unified government across both of them? Very problematic questions. And so what we're saying is not now. There's no, this is not the time to be talking about Palestinian statehood. We need to defeat those terrorists. Gaza needs to be free of Hamas rule. And perhaps what people don't realise is that Hamas has presence in the West Bank, and there's support for Hamas, which in a recent poll is at 48% among active voters in the West Bank. So we could potentially see Hamas rise in the West Bank at this current time if they're not completely defeated.
Okay, what signal do you think New Zealand government would be sending if we did join this sort of woke international movement to recognise the Palestinian state?
Well, look, it's a populist movement at the moment, and these leaders are coming out with these statements for their domestic reasons, but they seem to really have no concept of what the reality is on the ground over there. And I think the vast majority of the public would be horrified to see the reality there. I mean, in the West Bank, you still have honour killings of women who are seen to have had some sexual impropriety. You still have the LGBT community who are persecuted and will be imprisoned. This is in the West Bank. This is not in Gaza. And I don't think the world understands the way things actually are on the ground. I mean, Mahmoud Abbas is extremely unpopular amongst his own people because of corruption, nepotism. They haven't managed to create a thriving economy. They live on international aid. He's 21 years into a 4-year term. There are all kinds of reasons why the West Bank, Gaza, the so-called Palestinian state, is in no way ready to be given statehood. You actually have to show that you've done the work to create the machinery for statehood.
Yeah. Sheree, I am going to put to you a question I put to the Israeli ambassador on Friday. No matter the state of... Well, I just want to check too. Has Israel declared war on Hamas? Well, how can you declare war on something that's not a state?
Well, it's a terrorist group, and they have declared their intention to defeat Hamas as a terrorist
What
group.
has happened is, and look, as much as anyone can, I know from outside, I know what happened on October the 7th, and I've talked to people who were there and have suffered from it, and people whose families are held hostage. But even on a moderate estimate, 60,000 more or less innocent civilians have been killed by the Israeli response to that. And there is a very simple moral question. Is that a proportionate way to wage a war on Hamas?
Well, my first question is, where do you get that figure from? And the second question is, what is...
Well, the figures that Hamas give us
include?
are like twice or three times that. But, you know, the most accurate figures, I say, are around 60,000 casualties.
Well, they don't include the fact that a great number of those are the combatants, and the Israeli estimate is around 17,000 combatants have been killed.
And I'm prepared to admit that we
military,
do not know the precise truth of that. Yeah.
I would just make another point that